My 2025 bold bet for every NFC team is coming your way today on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're the Draft Dudes. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills, usually joined by Kyle Krabs of Locked On Dolphins. And we are your NFL experts here with you daily to talk team building across the league on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to issue a big thank you, shout out, and welcome to our everydayers. Those of you who never miss a single episode, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Well, folks, welcome in, and we are continuing a bold bets week here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. You heard my AFC bold bets on Monday. You heard Kyle's AFC bold bets on Tuesday. Today, we get started with the NFC, and I have a little something for every team in this conference. And so Kyle and I are recording these independently. I don't know his bets. He doesn't know mine. And I'm looking forward to getting together here in the near future, and we can challenge each other on these bets and decide which ones we're going to take each other up on and see where it all lands at the end of the season. And let me also reiterate that these are supposed to be bold. I'm not here to tell you, easy stuff that anyone can predict. I'm trying to think outside the box and come up with something creative, but also try to tell a little bit of the story of the team, or at least how I think things are going to go this season. So a lot of intentionality behind what I'm bringing to the table today. So with that out of the way, let's get into it. We'll start with the NFC South, then we'll do the North, West, and close with the East. All right, NFC South, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have been on top of this division. I think they probably will stay on top of this division this year. But here's my Bucs bold bet for 2025. I have Tampa Bay with a defensive player that will record 10 or more sacks. A double-digit sack season incoming for Tampa Bay. Shaq Barrett, the last Bucs player to do it, that was back in 2021. And then we have some contenders this year. Yaya Diaby, who had a lot of pressures last year. Hassan Reddick is part of this mix after a down year with the Jets, goofy situation overall. I think he's in a good spot to remind us of a player that we talked about as a defensive player of the year candidate not that long ago. Kalijah Cansey with a little bit more experience. I think it's possible. And there's not been a lot of 10-plus sack seasons for the Bucs in their history. Only 9 players in the history of the Bucs have recorded a double-digit sack season. Now, a couple of them had multiple double-digit sack seasons, but that's it, 9 total. And like 3 of those only had 1. Shout out Chidi Ahanatu. Was it one guy, Marcus Smith? I think he had a double-digit sack season out of nowhere. They've had some random ones. But I think they get their 10th player to do it this year, most likely Diaby, Reddick, or Cansey. I think that team will be a little bit better defensively overall. I am concerned about Levante David's running mate, but I think their corner situation has improved. A healthy Antoine Winfield will help a ton. Tyke Smith in his second season. I think there's a lot of reasons to be hopeful for that defense this year, and I think you'll be able to measure that a little bit with some sacks, which it's been a little bit of a sour topic, right, with some investments in pass rushers that haven't really panned out. I think they'll get a double-digit sack guy this year. Next up, the Atlanta Falcons, and we'll keep talking about sacks, but maybe not as positively. I know that getting the quarterback on the ground on passing downs has been a problem for Atlanta, not just last year or the year before or 5 years before that or 10 years. I mean, it's been going on for decades. I got bad news. I don't see it getting better. I have the Atlanta Falcons down for under 40 sacks this year. under 40. I know that's not what Falcons fans want to hear after you just invested 3 first-round picks in James Pierce and Jalen Walker, after investing a bunch of day 2 capital and other pass rushers over the last few years. But I just don't love the collection of talent. I don't think there's enough diversity with skill sets. I'm greatly concerned about what's going on at corner. I think A.J. Terrell kind of needs to bounce back. We'll see about Mike Hughes. We'll see about the slot. I think there's questions there, questions on the interior defensive line, and just a lot of young players that need to put it together. There's so much pressure there, and I don't think that helps. I'm sure it's been a conversation every year for the Falcons. This is the year we're going to get after the quarterback, and when that happens, right, I mean, these guys can feel that urgency, and I don't know. I don't think that helps. So, despite more investments, I'm not sure I see the path for Atlanta to really turn the corner rushing the passer like they've set out to do. Next up, the Carolina Panthers. Put me down for 1,000 receiving yards for Tet McMillan as a rookie. We talked pre-draft about Carolina, and it was what defensive player they were going to get. And then they picked Tet McMillan, and it comes out that there's a relationship there with Bryce Young, and it feels like maybe Bryce Young wanted this player. I think he's going to get a lot of targets. And I know Xavier Leggett was a first-round pick last year, and Jalen Coker came along, and there's really good chemistry with Bryce Young and Adam Thielen. But I think there's a lot of intentionality with this pick. We've seen Dave Canales really thrive with this type of skill set in his other stops. And I think Bryce Young's the type of quarterback that is going to have very preferred targets that he's going to want to throw the ball to. And I think there's a lot of urgency for this to work out and for our Carolina to not face criticism for, you should have picked a defensive player. I think there's a lot of volume here if that turns into a lot of production. So put me down for 1,000 yards for Tet McMillan. Last up in this division, the New Orleans Saints. My prediction for them is that Alvin Kamara records the first 1,000-yard rushing season of his career. It's kind of hard to believe that he hasn't done it. Mark Ingram has done it most recently for the Saints, but Kamara's never done it. Of course, a lot of receiving production that goes into his overall profile, but I think this year they get it done with him getting 1,000 yards rushing. Obviously, Kamara's capable of it, but this is a team that has major questions at quarterback. I mean, the biggest question marks at quarterback in the league exist with this team, whether it's Jake Haener or Tyler Shuck or Spencer Rattler. Point being is they're going to want to run the football, and we saw what Kellen Moore's been able to do running the football throughout his career. Alvin Kamara gets the first 1,000-yard rushing season of his career. I bet you, I don't have the numbers, but I'll spitball on it. I wonder how many instances there have been of a player at this stage of their career. Like, you have X amount of rushing yards for your career, but you don't get your first 1,000-yard season until, this certain threshold. I hopefully that landed what I'm trying to say there, but I bet you it'd be pretty historic for a player like Alvin Kamara, who has played a lot of football. Let's be honest. I mean, I'm looking up his numbers here on the fly. This will be his 9th season. Has a running back entering their 9th season ever recorded their first 1,000-yard rushing season? Probably not. Has a running back with 6,700 career rushing yards and 60 rushing touchdowns ever not had a 1,000-yard season? I think there's some really cool nuggets that will come forward if this is true. In fact, I mean, Kamara's only been over 900 yards rushing twice in 8 seasons. So it'll be fun to see if that happens. I think it will. All right, coming up next, the highly competitive NFC North. In fact, one of my predictions will be predicting who wins it. We'll do that here next, folks. Be sure to stick with me. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following all the action, so why not make it a little more thrilling? with FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. I love logging in the morning, see what profit boosts are available. They've been given a lot of profit boosts, like a 30% profit boost on a same game parlay for Major League Baseball. I've been taking advantage of that. And it's a great time to look at football futures bets, whether it's win projections, over-unders, stat projections. You got some bold bets that you like, well, go cash in over on FanDuel and get some earnings from your football knowledge. And if you're new to FanDuel, new customers, you can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. So open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Welcome back, everybody. Continuing our NFC bold bets. We've done the South. Next up, the North. I told you I was going to predict someone to win the division. Let's do it right now. My bold bet for the Detroit Lions is that they win this division. It'll be competitive. I think highly of Minnesota. I think highly of Green Bay. I'm not so sure on Chicago yet. But I think there's a lot of energy for predicting a regression for Detroit, and I'm not sure they're going to win 15 games. But I think there's some doubt, and I think Dan Campbell loves it. No Ben Johnson. No Aaron Glenn. Frank Ragnow's gone. Aiden Hutchinson off the injury. Aleem McNeil off the injury. Carlton, no, he's not on the team anymore. But a lot of players off injuries. I think they use that for all the right reasons. Still a team that's loaded with blue chip talent. Loaded. Jahmyr Gibbs, Sam Laporta, Penei Sewell, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jack Campbell, Brian Branch, Kirby Joseph, Terrion Arnold's a stud, DJ Reed's added to the mix. I just don't see this massive regression coming. I think it flies in the face of who Dan Campbell is as a head coach. I don't think he's getting enough credit, to be honest with you. I think he delivers in a big way, and Detroit is hosting at least one playoff game. I mean, that team won 15 games with literally the whole defense injured. That didn't matter. You think they're concerned about a couple of play callers and a center? Put me down for the Lions win in the North. All right, Green Bay Packers. How about a 1,000-yard tight end, Tucker Kraft? Put me down for that. 1,000 receiving yards for Tucker Kraft. Only 3 tight ends topped 1,000 receiving yards last year. Brock Bowers, George Kittle, Trey McBride. I think Tucker Kraft is part of that group this year. Obviously, year 3. I think he had a little over 700 yards last year. Part of this is what I think of Tucker Kraft. I loved watching him in college, the physicality, and he's already probably the best yards after catch tight end in the league. Physical and just a tone setter. So a lot of this is what I believe Tucker Kraft is. And also, I think there's some nice vertical possibilities with this passing game with Jaden Reed, with the arrival of Matthew Golden. And I think that lift does nothing but help create more space for Tucker Kraft in the middle of the field and with the ball in his hands. Obviously, a very good offensive line. Fleur's really good with play calling and designing an offense. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity here for Tucker Kraft to build on his breakout season from last year. Chicago Bears. We're going to lean into DeAndre Swift here. I'm predicting 1,500 yards from scrimmage for DeAndre Swift, which would comfortably be the most of his career. 1,345 is his previous career high. You know, we forget Swift has time with Ben Johnson, so this isn't like a new situation for him. The interior offensive line has been massively upgraded. I mean, massively upgraded with Jackson and Tooney and Dahlman. And then maybe there's some level of questions at tackle, but you're not questioning the run blocking of Jones or Wright, not at all. There's a lot riding on Caleb Williams and his development, and we'll see how that goes. I'm fascinated to see how he evolves and what Ben Johnson can unlock out of him. But as that takes care of itself in whatever way it does or doesn't, I think they're going to lean on DeAndre Swift. And I kind of expected this team to be a little bit more interested in adding to their backfield, and they really didn't. There must be a level of trust and confidence in him to produce. He's been a productive back. I think maybe even underrated at this point. But I think big years coming for DeAndre Swift. So put me down for 1,500 yards. Minnesota Vikings. My prediction for them is really rooted in rushing offense. I think they are top 15 this year in rushing yards per game and yards per carry. And look, that's not been true for the Vikings under Kevin O'Connell. The best season that they've had under Kevin O'Connell in terms of yards per carry was 24th. In terms of yards per game, rushing, 27th, 29th, and 19th. I think they're top 15 in both categories this year, despite Aaron Jones getting a little bit older. I mean, obviously, this is another team that prioritized their interior offensive line, bringing in Ryan Kelly and Will Fries. Darisaw healthy is huge. I think J.J. McCarthy's part of this equation as well as an athletic quarterback. That's something that they really haven't had. It's been Kirk Cousins and Sam Darnold. Those aren't guys that are nearly as talented of a runner as J.J. McCarthy. So I think it's McCarthy plus an improved interior offensive line. I think he'll get more out of this rushing offense than we've seen in a while. So put me down for top 15 yards per game and yards per carry for the Vikings running the ball in 2025. All right, let's start getting into the NFC East. We'll start with the Philadelphia Eagles, reigning Super Bowl champions. I think they're absolutely a Super Bowl contender again this year, and they're scoring very, very high in all of our roster rankings that we will talk more about here in the coming weeks. So step one is I need you to know that I think the Eagles are awesome, and I think there's a really good chance that they get back to the Super Bowl, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if they win back-to-back Super Bowls, okay? So keep that in mind before I say this. My prediction for Philadelphia is that they have at least one 2-game losing streak in 2025. To start the year, remember, they got to the new offensive coordinator, new play caller in place, and there's some turnover, not really offensively, but defensively. They start with Dallas, Kansas City, the Rams, Bucks, and Broncos. I mean, there's an opportunity to drop 2 in a row. Then you have another stretch of Packers, Lions, Cowboys. Then you have another stretch of Commanders, Bills, Commanders. Somewhere in there, I think the Eagles will drop 2 in a row. Still probably win. I think they will win that division. I think they'll go on a run for sure. But I also think that their story this year includes a 2-game losing streak. Next up, we have the Dallas Cowboys. This might be my most bold bet yet. My prediction for Dallas is that Kyer Elam leads the team in interceptions. I know they have Trayvon Diggs and Deron Bland and Malik Hooker. But I think Kyer Elam's the guy that's going to get the most interceptions. Now, look, that's predicting him to start. But I think between Diggs and Siobhan Revel, their 3rd-round pick coming off of injuries, I think there's a real opportunity for Kyer Elam to step in there and be a starter on the outside, especially if they want to play Bland more in the slot. I think Matt Eberflus has had good resumes with corners. I think Kyer Elam needed a change of scenery. Obviously, it didn't work out in Buffalo, but I think for him, it's not a capability thing. It's just he needed to get out of that circumstance. And not that Buffalo was not a place where a player can be awesome. That's obviously not true. But you think about Kyer Elam's story as a guy that, his dad and uncle play in the NFL, 5-star recruit in the SEC, 1st-round pick. I think for him, everything came very linearly in his football career. He didn't face a lot of adversity. The next thing you know, he's in Buffalo. He's competing for a job, and he can't beat out the 6th-round pick from Villanova and Christian Benford. And then every time he got on the field, it felt like such an urgent opportunity to prove himself. And, I think he's pressing. He wasn't playing free. He's in his own head. And he just needed to get out of there. He needed to go somewhere else where he can just have a fresh slate. And I think Dallas is a great spot for him to do that. So I think you can simultaneously realize that it wasn't going to happen in Buffalo, but also that doesn't mean that Buffalo should have stayed committed to him and that Dallas is going to be a great chance for him to go do his thing. And if there's anything that's true about Kyrie Elam, he's got really good ball skills. Even in his limited chances in Buffalo, he took away the football and had some monumental playoff interceptions against the Dolphins, picked off Pat Mahomes in the red zone, playoff interception against Pittsburgh. So don't sleep on him. I think that he leads Dallas in interceptions this year. All right, coming up next, the rest of the NFC East and the entirety of the NFC West. Folks, be sure to stick with me. NFC bold bets continue right now. You get Kyle Krabs tomorrow with his NFC bold bets. I'm excited to see where he takes these. Let's finish up here with the NFC East, then the West. All right, New York Giants. I'm all in on Abdul Carter. Was my number one player in the draft. I think he has at least 2 more sacks than Kayvon Thibodeau. Kayvon Thibodeau entering his 4th season, had 11 and a half 2 years ago. I think Abdul Carter does 2 more sacks than KT. That first step, that explosiveness is really special. I think he's got way more of a pass rush ceiling than KT. I really do. I think that shows up in year 1. Both high picks. Both will play a lot, I'm sure. I think Carter gets it done in terms of, he might even lead the team. He might outproduce Brian Burns. I'm not ready to predict that, but I think he tops KT by 2 or more sacks this year. Washington Commanders. Close your ears, Commanders fans. You're not going to like what I have to say. I am predicting a win regression by 2 or more games. This team was 12-5 last year. I think they are no better than 10-7 this year. That doesn't mean I don't like Dan Quinn or that I don't like Jaden Daniels. I think highly of those people, and I would love to see Jaden Daniels continue to prosper. I'm very, very impressed with him. But I think they had some goofy wins last year. And I don't love the makeup of this roster. I'm sorry, I just don't. And they're counting on a lot of late stage players like Zach Ertz, like Bobby Wagner, Deebo Samuel, like Austin Eckler. They're counting on these guys to be really important. Marshawn Lattimore's got to stay healthy, not really a thing for him. Sam Cosmi's their best offensive lineman. He's out until when? We'll see about Laramie Tunsil. Houston has O-line problems, and they wanted to get rid of him. I don't know. I questions all that D-line. I got major questions about the D-line. Major questions. Who's playing next to Bobby Wagner? I don't know. I think they probably win 10 games. I'm probably going to be right at a 2-game regression. I don't think they'll be worse than a 9 or 10 win team, but I'm not seeing 11, 12 plus wins out of this team. I love the trajectory, and I think they're still the type of team that's going to be dangerous with that quarterback, but I think they overachieved last year, and I'm not sure that they took their roster in the direction that I would have. So I'm predicting a bit of a regression here, 2-game regression. So 10 wins or fewer for Washington this year. All right, the NFC West. We'll start with Seattle Seahawks. I'm in on Ken Walker this year. Put me down for 1,400 scrimmage yards for Ken Walker. His career high at this point is 1,215 yards. It's a contract year for Ken Walker. I love Kubiak coming over to run this offense. I love the wide zone. Ken Walker has some of the most exciting home run ability in the NFL out of the backfield, and I think that this run scheme will open up a lot of opportunity for him to rip off those explosive runs. I think they are certainly a little different at receiver, obviously. They got an inline tight end in Barner that I like. I think this is going to be a big year for Ken Walker, so put me down for 1,400 or more yards from scrimmage. For the Rams, put me down for 3 players offensively to get 1,000 yards from scrimmage. The last time this happened for the Rams was 2019. Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, and Todd Gurley. Well, none of those guys are around, but I think the trio of Kyren Williams, Puka Nacua, and Devontae Adams, I think 3, they all get over 1,000 yards from scrimmage. Now, obviously, health is the wild card there. But I think that Stafford's the type of quarterback that kind of likes to lock in on his guys. I think you're going to see a ton of targets for Nacua and Adams, and of course Kyron's been the horse there. So put me down for 3 players to get 1,000 yards from scrimmage from that offense. For the Arizona Cardinals, I'm all about Marvin Harrison Jr. Put me down for 1,300 receiving yards for Marvin Harrison Jr. Only 3 players in the league did that last year. So if you don't think that's aggressive, well, only 3 players in the entire NFL did that last year, and Marvin Harrison had 885 yards. I'm predicting like 415 more receiving yards for him in year 2. So I'm all about Marvin Harrison. And look, I mean, Trey McBride's the focal point of that offense in the passing game. Of course, James Conner is a high-volume piece, but I think even with McBride getting his, I think Marvin Harrison does as well. Lastly, the San Francisco 49ers. I am predicting that they finish outside the top 10 in total defense for the first time since 2018. So yards per game, outside the top 10 for the first time since 2018. Maybe even outside the top 15, but we'll officially go down as the top 10. I just have questions about this defense. What do we really know about the D-line outside of Nick Bosa and some depth players? Tons of rookies are going to have to contribute there. Who's playing next to Fred Warner? When's Malik Mustafa going to be ready to go? What's the plan at corner? I know Renardo Green and Diamador Lenore, but who's really going to play in this slot? Is it Upton Scout? How does Trey Brown factor in? I think there's a lot of questions. Year 1 for Robert Saleh coming in. I don't think he has the rotation that he needs up front to be the type of defense that he wants. I'm not sure he's got the corners either. I like Renardo Green and Diamador Lenore, but is Lenore going to play inside or outside? Why do they draft Upton Scout if Lenore's not going to go outside? But if he's been at his best in the slot, why are you moving? I don't know. Too many questions. Too many questions. So I think they're outside the top 10 in total D for the first time since 2018. All right, folks, there you have it. My bold bets for every team in the NFC this year. Kyle's coming tomorrow. Hope you're enjoying this week. Always fun to kind of go out there and, say it with your chest and get on top of the hill and see what you come up with, and then ultimately you see how you did. So thanks for being here. As always, I kindly ask that you share, subscribe, rate, and review. Have a great rest of your day, and we look forward to catching up with you again real soon.